Coming up, gun violence reported in 6 states this weekend brings the number of U.S. mass shootings to over 280 for the year. And the North Dakota Commerce Department is launching a new $3 million grant program to advance research and help develop additional vaccines. Plus, a deadly storm ripped through the Fargo-Moorhead area 64 years ago, leaving 10 people dead. We revisit the history of that day. Valley News Live at 10 starts now.
This is Valley News Live at 10.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. I am Nashay Taylor. Tonight, a Grand Forks man is now in jail after threatening others with a shotgun. The Grand Forks Police Department was called to the 1200 block of North 39th Street shortly before 5 p.m. this evening on a report of a man exiting his home with the gun. Authorities say while the man was in the parking lot, he loaded the gun and made threats to individuals across the street. GFPD later arrested the man and recovered a 20-gauge shotgun from his residence. Anyone with information about this incident is urged to contact GFPD at 701-787-8000. And take a good look at your screen. The Grand Forks Police Department needs your help finding these 5 individuals. If you know their whereabouts, you are once again asked to contact GFPD at 701-787-8000. And the Bemidji Police Department is seeking help for the public in identifying a person of interest in regards to an ongoing investigation. If you know this person, you can reach out by private messaging the BPD on Facebook or calling Officer Olson at 218-368-9352. When contacting the Bemidji Police, you are asked to reference photo 450 when speaking with the officer or leaving a message. Gun violence reported in 6 states this weekend brings the number of U.S. mass shootings to over 280 for this year. Here's the latest.
Another deadly weekend in the U.S., with even more mass shootings and gun violence incidents. Overnight, a shooting in Minneapolis left 5 people injured. And in Colorado Springs, 2 separate shootings less than a mile apart Friday night. One shooting erupted at a mall carnival, and the other outside a restaurant. 5 people total, including 3 young people, ended up in the hospital. The specifics of each incident vary, but all 3 tell the same story: the terrifying normalcy of gun violence. CNN defines a mass shooting as 4 or more people shot, excluding the shooter. That's happened more than 280 times across the country since the beginning of 2021, according to the Gun Violence Archive. That's about 40% more than this point in 2020. And 65% more than in 2019.
That type of violence has been surging through the pandemic, and now in 2021 we're really seeing those numbers rise. And we can think about how the pandemic has increased stress, increased frustration, added to things like job loss and trauma and isolation, and we know all of that has an impact on gun violence.
In Chicago, a mass shooting early Tuesday morning left 4 people dead and another 4 injured. Among those killed, 19-year-old Shermetria Williams, who was supposed to attend her high school graduation.
Unfortunately, Chicago is not unique. We are part of a club of cities to which no one wants to belong. Cities with mass shootings.
Across the country in Arizona, a single suspect was arrested in connection with 8 different shootings in the Phoenix metro area that left 1 person dead and at least 12 others injured by gunfire or hit by shrapnel.
Some law enforcement agencies blame the rise in shootings on criminal justice reform, which may be letting too many violent criminals back out on the streets. Others blame it on police reforms that they say make it more difficult for officers to do their jobs. And we all learned a lot about viruses during the pandemic, and scientists are hoping to keep the momentum going in North Dakota. The state's Commerce Department is launching a new $3 million grant program to advance research and help develop additional vaccines for future diseases.
Some of the applications may tackle COVID, but also other coronaviruses that are currently in the global sort of disease ecosystem. It's more of leveraging the technology they produce from coronavirus production or manufacturing to solve other challenges.
The program will partner with Operation Warp Speed. The money came from unused EGRC dollars meant for restarting businesses. Nearly 45% of U.S. population is fully vaccinated against the coronavirus. That's 149 million Americans, according to the CDC. 16 states have already reached President Joe Biden's goal to vaccinate 70% of adults with at least one dose. That includes some states with large populations like New York, California, and Pennsylvania. 14 more states have vaccinated more than half of their residents and are well on their way to the president's goal. The current pace of COVID-19 vaccinations in the U.S. is about 1.3 million doses a day. And millions of coronavirus vaccine doses from the U.S. arrived today in Taiwan. The U.S. government donated 2.5 million doses of the Moderna vaccine. The donation follows an initial delivery of 750,000 doses that arrived after a visit of a delegation of U.S. senators 2 weeks ago. Taiwan's president released a statement expressing her sincere gratitude to the American government and all the people who were part of this project. Top diplomats said today further progress had been made at talks between Iran and global powers to try to negotiate and restore a landmark 2015 agreement to contain Iranian nuclear development that was later abandoned by the Trump administration. They said it was now up to the governments involved in the negotiations to make political decisions. It was the first official meeting since Iran's hardline judiciary chief won a landslide victory in the country's presidential election. Some diplomats expressed concerns that Iran's election of Ibrahim Raisi as president could complicate a possible return to the agreement. A Russian news outlet says searchers have found the body of an American student who had been missing for several days. About 50 volunteers joined a search and rescue team looking for 34-year-old Catherine Siro, who was a graduate of California's UC Davis. Searchers combed a wooded area about 250 miles east of Moscow, where the woman was enrolled at a university. Local news reports said Siro was last seen on Tuesday after getting into a car. Russia's investigative committee said a man with a criminal record was arrested on suspicion of murder in the case. He was arraigned in court today on the accusation of killing the American student. Siro moved from California to Russia in 2019 to study law. Her cause of death has not been specified. 64 years ago, a deadly storm ripped through the Fargo-Moorhead area, leaving 10 people dead. It also produced a F5 tornado. Valley News Team's Aaron Walling spoke with experts on how that day became etched into history.
64 years ago, on June 20th, 1957, the Fargo-Moorhead area was struck by a deadly F5 tornado that caused death and substantial damage, hitting speeds between 261 to 318 miles per hour.
That was about 10 mile long and 50 minute long, meaning, and given that that was a 600 yard wide, that would give about 2 minutes in each point. That tornado just devastated the area.
It was the first tornado to receive an F5 rating based off the scale from Tatsuya Fujita, who was also called Mr. Tornado. Reports say that 10 people died, over 100 were injured, and $25 million of damage occurred. Of those that died, 6 were the Munson children.
It was Mercedes Munson, their mother. It was her 36th birthday that day. And the reason why they stayed home was because they were planning on throwing her a surprise party. And so there were neighbors who were telling them, you need to get in the car and go. And they wouldn't leave the house because they were wanting to stay there and give her this surprise birthday party. And they stayed and they were all killed.
Tornadoes are extremely dangerous and cause catastrophic damage. Valley News Live's Summer Schnellbach explains on what has to happen for a tornado to arrive.
So say down at ground level, the wind is moving in one direction, maybe 20 miles an hour, so for example, and 5,000 feet higher, it's moving in a completely different direction in a different speed. That's going to create a horizontal tube of air within that thunderstorm. Then within that thunderstorm also you have rising air, rising warm air from the surface. And once that hits that horizontal spinning tube of air, it can tilt it and become vertically spinning.
64 years later, and we have a better understanding of these dangerous storms. In Fargo, Aaron Walling, Valley News Live.
The most recent F5 tornado in the U.S. was 8 years ago on May 20th, 2013, when Moore, Oklahoma was hit, causing the deaths of 24 people. Later on Valley News Live at 10, organizers of the Tokyo Olympics are discussing capping attendance at the opening ceremony of the games at 20,000. But first, we're in for a chilling morning. Summer is up next to share how low those temperatures will get.